Welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. Rainn Wilson versus Sardoche, the championship finals. Rainn Wilson leading 1-0. Sardoche needs to win this. He is the rating favorite of the matchup, but this game could go either way. Let's just see how it went. Sardoche does have the white pieces, so he's got that going for him, and he starts with d4. Will we see a London system? Rainn goes for his normal Pierce modern defense setup that we've seen him go d6, and we do see a London system from Sardoche. Bishop f4 and g6. c4 now, more commonly in the London system, is e3 or c3, but I actually like the c4 more than either of those moves from Sardoche. I think c4 is much more principled and controls the center much better than e3 is. So that's just my take on the London system. Short take. I have more opinions about it, but I'm not going to get into them right now. Bishop g7 from Rainn and knight to c3 from Sardoche. b6 now from Rainn and knight to f3 from Sardoche. Continuing development. Really great job here from Sardoche so far. Bishop b7 from Rainn, going for that double fianchetto setup, and e4 from Sardoche. And this is a great move. You know, if your opponent does not grab the center, you want to grab the center yourself. e4, d4, c4. You play all these moves if your opponent lets you, and this is exactly what Sardoche does. So great job to him. And we have e6 now from Rainn. Bishop d3 from Sardoche, continuing to develop. Knight to e7, queen d2 from Sardoche, potentially going for this bishop h6 and trading off Rainn's fianchettoed bishop. I think this is a good plan here. And knight b to c6. So Rainn's sort of going for a hippopotamus setup, which if you're unfamiliar with that, it's basically where you fianchetto both bishops, play e6 and d6, and normally you bring your knights to e7 and d7, but Rainn has put his knight on c6 here, and then you choose which way to castle, and sometimes you also play h6 and a6. And basically the point is you're not creating any weaknesses in your position, but it's also just very passive. But it's hard to play against because there are no weaknesses in your position. And, you know, in chess, we're taught to attack your opponent's weaknesses. So it's like, what do you do if you're playing against this type of setup? But there are ways to counter it. You just have to really know what you're doing. And that's why it's sort of popular at, you know, intermediate levels of chess. So we'll see if it works against Sardoche. Here, I think Sardoche's best call is to play bishop h6 and try to infiltrate on these dark squares after trading off this fianchettoed dark squared bishop. I think that's Sardoche's best call here. But we have queen to e3 instead, and now we have queen d7 from Rainn. So maybe this is why he didn't develop this knight to d7, because he wanted to play his queen to d7 and castle queenside. We have a3 now from Sardoche and castles queenside. By the way, instead of queen to d7, if we just go back a couple moves, Rainn actually had a knight takes d4 here, and after knight takes e4, now e5, this sort of center fork trick. After knight f3, e takes f4, and queen takes f4, for example, black has a very pleasant position here. So I think Rainn definitely could have gone for this, but we see queen d7 instead, and after a3, castles queenside from Rainn. We have b4 now, and this is a mistake because it just I mean, there's still this knight takes d4 center trick, but there's an even worse tactical error, which starts with e5, and this is forking the d pawn and the bishop, so you have to take this d takes e5, and now after d takes e5, it's a discovered attack on this d bishop, and this pawn is also hitting the f bishop, so this bishop is attacked twice now that black has castled. So Rainn could have won here very easily with this tactical sequence, but he misses it. He plays rook d to f8 anyway. I think he was thinking, you know, I castled queenside, white's going to castle kingside, so I should get my rooks to the kingside to attack on the kingside. But he could have ended the game right then and there with e5. But we have rook d to f8 instead. We have b5 now from Sardoche and knight to a5, getting that knight out of there. We have e5 now from Sardoche and f5 from Rainn. I think d takes e5 would have been better here. D takes e5, d takes e5, and now knight to f5, and your knight is very pleasant here. Here, white actually has to play bishop takes f5, and now you can take with either pawn. I would probably take with the g pawn, just open up this g file here. And yeah, I think white is doing very well here because you're going to get this open G file. This bishop has this very nice diagonal, and you could also maybe potentially control the D file later in the game. So I think black is doing very well here, but instead we have F5 from Rainn. E takes D6 now, and C takes D6, and now this C file is open against black's king, so white could get some counterplay against black's king later on. We have rook to D1. I think rook to C1 would have been much better here, unpinning this knight from this D pawn here, and also just getting this rook off of this diagonal here, defending your knight, and getting your rook on the same file as black's king as well. So I think rook C1 would have been much stronger than rook to D1, but we have rook to D1 instead. Knight B3 now from Rainn, and this is a bit of a pointless move, as Sardoche explains to Rainn with this next move, bishop C2, and the knight pretty much has to go back to A5. You can actually play knight takes D4 here and give up 2 pieces for the rook, but you probably don't want to do this as black. So knight to A5 is the call here, and Rainn plays it. He plays knight to A5. And here now Rainn is attacking this C4 pawn, so you got to defend it with a move like queen to E2. However, Sardoche, I don't know if he sacrificed this pawn or if he just didn't see it, but he castles instead. And now Rainn can take this pawn, but it might not be a good idea because you would be opening the C file against your king. On the other hand, it is a pawn, and white will be able to open the C file, whether you want to or whether black allows them or not, really. The C file is opening up, so it might be worth it to take the pawn, and I think it actually is. I think it's very much worth it to take this pawn, which Rainn does. He takes this pawn, and now this is a fork on the queen and this pawn, this A pawn as well. So yeah, we have queen to E2 now from Sardoche, and here you actually cannot take this A3 pawn, because if you do, then there's bishop D2 or bishop B3 are going to be very very troublesome. Bishop D3 would simply trap the knight, and bishop B2 would also trap the knight and also look at this E6 pawn, which would be very weak. So you got to just come back to A5 here with your knight. But Rainn takes this pawn on A3. We have knight takes A3, and Sardoche does play bishop B3, trapping that knight now and looking at this E6 pawn, and also getting one step closer to having this rook on this open file. He's moving this bishop off of the C file. We have knight D5 here, which is really the only move as Rainn to stay in this game. And now knight takes D5, bishop takes D5, and now rook C1 check from Sardoche. We have king to B8, but after bishop takes D5, E takes D5, and rook to C6 going after this D pawn, the position is really tough for black. Here, the computer is suggesting rook to F6, but it's just a really tough position to play as black overall. We have knight C4, so maybe looking to trap this rook, but also defending this D6 pawn, as it was attacked 2 times and only defended once by the queen. But here, Sardoche can play knight D2 and basically look to remove this knight and then win this D pawn. And with your king on this diagonal, your queen look on the same file as the D pawn, it's not going to be good here as black. So knight D2 definitely would have been winning on the spot for Sardoche, but instead we have rook to C1, and now black can get back into the game with rook to F6. But instead we have rook C8 from Rainn, and this blunders to rook 1 takes C4. And the idea here is if D takes C4, then simply rook takes D6, and there will be, the queen is attacked, there will be really nasty discoveries. It doesn't matter where you move the queen here, say queen to F7 for example, then there is this rook to F6 discovered check on the king, and the queen will be won the next move, just for example. So that's the idea here, and obviously if you don't take this, then you're just down a piece. If you take this rook here, then there's rook takes C6, and white is just going to be up a piece. So the question is, will Sardoche go for this rook 1 takes C4? Yes, he does. He plays rook 1 takes C4. Sardoche doing those tactics. Very good by Sardoche. And we see rook takes C6 from Rainn. Probably not the most testing line. I think the most testing line would have been D takes C4. And now after rook takes D6, now you can play queen C7. and it looks like you lose the queen. You actually do lose the queen after rook takes b6, but I think now after a takes b6, bishop takes c7, and king takes b7, or sorry, not king takes b7, because then you get forked with the queen on e7, but rook takes c7 instead. Now you have 2 rooks for the queen, and this is still a game. So I think this would have been the most testing line from Rainn, but instead we simply have rook takes c6 from Rainn, and now after rook takes c6, white is simply up a piece, and black has no counterplay at all. So let's see how Sardoche converts this. We have bishop f8, just trying to defend that d pawn, and now knight g5. Knight f7 will come next, or you know, even rerouting the queen to g3 or something. Maybe this queen will come into e6. Black's position is just falling apart here. We have bishop to h6 from Rainn, and now bishop takes d6. I think rook takes d6 would have been much stronger, but we have bishop takes d6 instead, which is still totally winning. And here I think the most resistance from Rainn is king to a8, because obviously the only other 2 moves, you don't want to play queen c7, just give up your queen for nothing. And if you play king b7, now there's rook c7, forking the king and the queen. And after you trade a couple times here, now there's even queen to e5 check, picking up the rook, and it will be a queen versus bishop, which is a very easy endgame to win here as Sardoche. So here, what will Rainn play after bishop takes d6? Well, he starts with king b7, and now will Sardoche see rook c7 check? Yes, he does. It didn't take him too long. Plays rook c7. He's been doing those tactics. Rook c7 check, queen takes c7, bishop takes c7, and king takes c7. And now there's a couple winning moves here. Queen e5, like we mentioned. Also, knight f7, I'm pretty sure will win this bishop here. But queen e5, I think, is the most winning, which Sardoche plays. He plays queen e5 check after king d7, queen takes h8. Didn't take him too long to see this tactic either. He's really been practicing those tactics, Sardoche has been. We have bishop takes g5 now, and let's see how Sardoche finishes Rainn off. Queen takes h7 check and king to c8. Queen takes g6 and bishop d2, saving that bishop. Queen takes f5 check now and king to c7. Queen takes d5 and king to b8. Queen c6, and will we see Sardoche promote one of these pawns? We likely will. Bishop f4 now and d5. Sardoche decides to promote this d pawn. a5 now, and Sardoche doesn't miss b takes a6 on croissant, as they call it. A Frenchman wouldn't miss it. After b takes a6, king to a7, and now this is mate in 1. There was nothing you can do to stop this queen b7 check. You can delay it by 1 move with bishop takes a2. But yeah, king a7 and queen b7 checkmate. Sardoche doesn't even bother promoting another pawn and takes the second game. He checkmates Rainn Wilson, and we are going to a tiebreaker in this finals match of PogChamps 3. So we'll just have to see. I think Sardoche is definitely the faster competitor out of these two, but we'll just have to see who takes it. I think both players have chances in the tiebreaker. So yeah, really good game here by Sardoche. Couple missed tactics from both ends, but a lot of advanced ideas, advanced tactics, and positional ideas as well. And both players very principled, got a lot of the principles down, all of the principles, really, most of them at least. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this game or this match. So check out the tiebreaker game over there, and check out my PogChamps 3 playlist up there. Stay awesome, stay subscribed. See you in the tiebreaker match. I'll see you next time. Love you guys.